The Devil's Claim. Chapter 1. Nightmares and Dust. The sun hung low, a bloated red eye glaring over the bleak expanse of the Badlands. Jack Hawthorne's boots crunched on sun-baked earth as he crested the hill. Redemption sprawled before him like a carcass picked clean. Night terrors clawed at the edges of his mind. Twisted faces, blood-curdling screams, a looming shadow with eyes like hellfire. Jack shook his head, spitting dust. The town's weathered sign creaked in the hot wind. Redemption. Pop. 201. The faded numbers lied. Place looked half dead already. Jack adjusted his hat, hand brushing the cool metal of his Colt. "Let's see what you're hiding," he muttered. Main Street stretched out, a gauntlet of peeling paint and wary eyes. Shopkeepers turned away. A woman hurried her children inside, door slamming shut. Only the saloon showed signs of life, piano notes drifting out alongside raucous laughter. The baleful tone of a church bell cut through the air. Once, twice, 7 times it tolled, each peal like a hammer driving nails into Jack's skull. He winced, memories flickering. A dimly lit room. 7 hooded figures, blood dripping from a knife. "You all right there, stranger?" Jack's hand flew to his holster as he spun. A woman in a sheriff's badge stood behind him, hand hovering near her own weapon. "Fine," Jack growled. "Just the heat." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Awful far from anywhere to just be passing through." "Maybe I ain't passing through." A tumbleweed skittered down the street. In the distance, a dog howled, the sound morphing into something that raised the hairs on Jack's neck. The sheriff's jaw tightened. "We don't take kindly to trouble here in Redemption." Jack met her gaze. "Seems to me trouble's already made itself home." The woman's hand twitched closer to her gun. The air grew thick, tasting of copper and something Jack couldn't name. Then the moment passed. The sheriff nodded curtly. "Saloon's got rooms if you need one. I'd be on my way by morning if I were you." She turned and walked away. Jack watched her go, the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on him from all sides. In the growing twilight, shadows seemed to writhe and elongate. As darkness fell, Redemption took on the air of a town poised on the edge of something vast and hungry. Jack squared his shoulders and headed for the saloon. Whatever nightmares plagued him, whatever secrets Redemption held, he'd faced worse. He hoped. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Saloon. The Redemption. Saloon's batwing doors groaned as Jack shouldered through. Conversation died, replaced by the scrape of chairs and clinking glasses. A dozen pairs of eyes bored into him, hungry and suspicious. Jack ignored them, making for the bar. The floorboards creaked, protesting each step. Behind him, whispers slithered like smoke. Trouble. "One of them order boys? Ain't natural, those eyes." The bartender, a mountain of a man with a scar twisting his lip, glowered. "What's your poison?" "Whiskey and information." A snort. "We got the first. Second's in short supply." Jack slid a coin across the pitted wood. The bartender's meaty hand covered it. "Folk been going missing," Jack said, voice low. "Any of that shortage have to do with that?" The room grew colder. Piano notes soured. The bartender leaned in, breath reeking of tobacco. "You do well to mind your own, stranger. Redemption don't cotton to outsiders asking questions." A chair scraped behind Jack. Heavy footsteps approached. "Well, looky here," a voice slurred. "Fresh meat." Jack turned, coming face to face with a bull of a man. Liquor fumes wafted off him. "Ain't you a pretty one?" the drunk sneered. "Bet you bleed just as nice." Jack's fingers twitched, longing for steel. But gun smoke and blood wouldn't loosen tongues. He forced a smile. Maybe some other time. The man's face twisted, a meaty fist swung, and stopped. Sheriff Thorne materialized, iron grip on the drunk's wrist. "That's enough, Jeb," she said. "Sleep it off." Jeb wrenched free, stumbling away with a murderous glare. The sheriff turned to Jack. "Told you to move on." "Just looking for a drink and a bed." Her eyes narrowed. "This about them nightmares of yours?" Jack stiffened. "What do you know about that?" A hint of something flashed in her eyes. "Pity? Fear?" "Nothing," she said. "But a man don't come to Redemption unless he's running to something or from something. You've got that look." Jack's retort died as screams erupted from outside. Not pain or fear, raw animal terror that set his teeth on edge. The sheriff bolted for the door, Jack on her heels. They emerged into twilight gone wrong, shadows writhing against blood-red sky. At the end of the street, a figure stood silhouetted, impossibly tall, horned. Jack blinked, and it was gone. Townsfolk muttered, crossing themselves. "Damn heat playing tricks," someone said. No one believed it. The sheriff's face was ash pale. "You wanted answers, stranger? Stick around. You'll get 'em soon enough." She strode off, leaving Jack alone in the growing dark. The air hummed with dread. In the distance, something howled, hungry, ancient, and far too close. Jack's hand found the grip of his Colt. Whatever redemption's secrets, he'd come too far to back down now. The real nightmare was just beginning. Chapter 3. The Hermit's Warning. Dawn broke over redemption like a fever, painting the sky in sickly hues. Jack's boots kicked up dust as he followed a twisted trail out of town. Gnarled trees clawed at the sky, their branches reaching like desperate hands. Old Man Jenkins's shack squatted on the horizon, a ramshackle affair of warped wood and rusted metal. As Jack approached, the acrid stench of herbs and something fouler assaulted his nostrils. A shotgun barrel greeted him at the door. "State your business or get off my land," a reedy voice croaked. Jack raised his hand slowly. "Heard you know things about this town? Things others won't say?" Roomy eyes peered out from a craggy face. "Might do. Might also know when to keep my trap shut." "People are dying, old-timer," Jenkins spat. "People always dying. It's the living you ought to worry about." The shotgun lowered a fraction. Jack seized his chance. "The thing I saw in town last night, what was it?" The old man's face went ashen. The gun clattered to the ground as gnarled fingers clutched at a charm around his neck. "You saw it?" Jenkins whispered. "Lord help you, boy. It's seen you back." The door creaked open. "Get in, quick, 'fore it hears us jawing." Inside was a hoarder's paradise of junk and arcana. Dusty tomes shared space with animal bones and jars of murky liquid. Jenkins hobbled to a rickety table, pouring amber liquid into chipped mugs. "Drink," he commanded. "You'll need it." The whiskey burned like liquid fire. Jack sputtered. "What the hell?" "Protection," Jenkins said. "Can't hurt you if you're touched by the sacred." Jack's head swam. The room's edges blurred, refocusing with unnatural clarity. Symbols carved into the walls pulsed with faint light. "What do you know?" Jack managed. Jenkins sank into a chair with a sigh that seemed to empty him. "Redemption's cursed, boy. Has been since 51. Founding fathers made a deal with something, old as the hills and twice as mean." Jack leaned in. "What kind of deal?" "The kind that demands blood." Jenkins's eyes went distant. "Every 7 years it comes to collect. 7 souls for 7 days of plenty." A chill ran down Jack's spine. "And if it doesn't get them? Then it takes what it wants. And Lord help us all if that happens." Something scratched at the window. Both men froze. "It's watchin'," Jenkins hissed. "Always watchin'. You need to—" The old man's words choked off. His eyes rolled back, body rigid. When he spoke again, the voice wasn't his own. "Jack Hawthorne," it rasped, inhuman and ancient. "The prodigal returns. Did you think you could hide from us forever?" Jack stumbled back, hand flying to his gun. Jenkins collapsed, strings cut. Heart pounding, Jack fled into the searing daylight. The hills echoed with mocking laughter. Back in town, the church bell began to toll. 1, 2, 3. Jack ran faster, the sound of his pounding boots unable to drown out the terrible certainty growing in his gut. Redemption's reckoning was coming, and somehow he was at the center of it all. Chapter 4. Echoes of the Past. The Redemption Cemetery sprawled across the hilltop, a patchwork of weathered stones and rusted crosses. Jack's boots crunched on sun-bleached gravel as he wove between the graves, eyes scanning for a familiar name. A raven's harsh caw split the air. Jack's hand twitched toward his holster. "Bit jumpy for a gunslinger, ain't ya?" He whirled. A woman stood behind him, dark hair whipping in the hot wind. Her eyes, green as summer sage, held a hint of familiar fire. "Eliza Hawthorne," she said, extending a calloused hand. "Hear you've been asking after our family." Jack hesitated, then clasped her hand. "Jack, I think I'm your brother." Eliza's eyes narrowed. "That's so. Funny, Ma never mentioned having another kid before she died." "I was sent away. For protection." "Protection from what?" The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of dust and decay. In the distance, Storm clouds gathered, unnaturally dark. "That's what I aim to find out," Jack said. Eliza studied him, then nodded toward a cluster of older graves. "Come on. Reckon you'll want to see this?" They stopped before a weathered headstone. Jack brushed away years of grime, revealing a name, Margaret Hawthorne. "Our mother," Eliza said softly, "died when I was just a girl. Town doctor said it was fever, but..." Eliza's jaw tightened. "I remember her screaming about shadows, about something coming for her baby." Jack's blood ran cold. "Me!" Thunder rumbled, closer now. The cemetery took on a greenish cast, shadows deepening. "What do you remember about growing up here?" Jack asked. Eliza shrugged. "Not much. Pa was gone a lot. Said he had business to attend to. Town always seemed off somehow, especially around the 7th of each month." Jack's hand unconsciously moved to the old scar on his palm. "The 7th. That's when..." A scream cut through the air, raw and terrified. Both Hawthorns spun toward the sound. At the cemetery gate, a figure struggled against something. Shadows writhed and twisted, solidifying into monstrous shapes with too many limbs and glowing red eyes. "Dear God," Eliza whispered. Jack drew his Colt, the metal thrumming with an energy he'd never felt before. "Get behind me!" The shadows surged forward. Jack fired, each shot punctuated by a flash of blue light. The creatures shrieked, recoiling. "How did you—" Eliza gasped. "No time! Run!" They sprinted through the graves, the storm of shadows hot on their heels. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating the twisted faces of the pursuing horrors. As they reached the cemetery gate, Jack felt a searing pain in his hand. The old scar split open, blood welling up. The shadows recoiled, hissing. In that moment of respite, Jack grabbed Eliza's arm, and they bolted down the hill toward town. Behind them, inhuman wails of frustration echoed across the windswept plain. The storm broke, sheets of rain lashing down. Eliza, panting, glanced at Jack's bleeding hand. "Looks like you've got some explaining to do, brother." Jack nodded grimly. The Hawthorne blood was the key to it all. Now he just had to figure out how to use it before redemption's dark past caught up with them both. Chapter 5. The Mayor's Shadow. The rain hammered redemption's tin roofs like 1,000 angry fists. Jack and Eliza huddled beneath the saloon's awning, clothes drenched and spirits low. "We need answers," Jack growled, watching lightning split the sky. Eliza nodded toward an imposing structure down the muddy street. "Town Hall. If anyone knows what's really going on, it's Mayor Blackwood." They slogged through the downpour, boots squelching in the muck. The town hall loomed before them, all polished wood and gleaming brass. A stark contrast to redemption's decay. Inside, oil lamps cast flickering shadows. A portly man in an expensive suit sat behind a massive desk, fingers steepled. "Well now," Mayor Blackwood drawled, "what brings the prodigal Hawthorne and our unexpected visitor to my humble office?" Jack's eyes narrowed. "You know who I am?" Blackwood's smile never reached his eyes. "My boy, in redemption, I know everything." The air grew thick, tasting of ozone and something darker. Jack's scarred palm itched. "Then you know about the disappearances," Eliza cut in. "The things we saw in the cemetery." Blackwood's face hardened. "Wild animal attacks. Nothing more." "Bullshit," Jack spat. "This town's cursed. Has been since 1851. What did the founding fathers do?" The mayor's chair creaked as he leaned back. "Careful, boy. Some questions are better left unasked." Lightning flashed, illuminating a massive painting behind Blackwood. 7 stern-faced men, one bearing a striking resemblance to the mayor himself. "Your ancestor," Jack said. "He was one of them." Blackwood's eyes glittered dangerously. "As was yours, Jack Hawthorne. Your father tried to undo what was done. Look where that got him." Eliza gasped. Jack's fists clenched. "What happened to our father?" he demanded. The mayor smiled, all teeth. "Why don't you ask him yourself?" A hidden door swung open. A gaunt figure shuffled in, eyes vacant. "Pa?" Eliza whispered. Jack recoiled. The man before them was a husk, more corpse than human. "What did you do to him?" Jack snarled, reaching for his gun. Blackwood tisked. Nothing. This is the price of defiance, of trying to break bonds older than time itself." The empty shell that was their father lurched forward. Jack's gun was in his hand, but he couldn't bring himself to fire. "Run," Eliza hissed, tugging his arm. They bolted, the sound of Blackwood's laughter echoing behind them. Outside, the storm had worsened. Wind howled like a hungry beast. "What now?" Eliza shouted over the tempest. Jack's eyes hardened. "We find out what really happened in 1851, and we end this, once and for all." As they sprinted through Redemption's rain-slick streets, shadows deeper than the storm writhed in their wake. The town's dark heart was awakening, hungry for the blood it had been promised so long ago, and the Hawthorne siblings were running out of time. Chapter 6. Blood Moon Rising. The storm broke at dusk, leaving Redemption bathed in an unnatural crimson twilight. Jack stood at the saloon window, watching the bloated moon claw its way above the horizon. "Blood moon," Eliza murmured, joining him. "Pa used to say they were bad omens." Jack's hand instinctively found his Colt. "After what we've seen, I'd say that's an understatement." The saloon door banged open. Sheriff Thorne burst in, wild-eyed and breathless. "It's happening again," she gasped. "The Parker boy. Something's taken him." Jack was moving before she finished speaking, Eliza close behind. They hit the streets at a run, the copper tang of fear thick in the air. Screams erupted from the edge of town. As they rounded the corner, Jack skidded to a halt, bile rising in his throat. A monstrosity loomed in the sickly moonlight, towering, misshapen, with too many limbs and eyes like hellfire. In one grotesque appendage, it clutched a struggling boy. "Sweet Jesus," Eliza whispered. The creature's head swiveled, fixing them with its burning gaze. It let out a sound part roar, part laugh, that shook the very ground. "Baal-Zoth," Jack breathed, the name rising unbidden from some deep primal part of his mind. He drew his gun, the metal thrumming with that strange energy. The demon's eyes narrowed. "Hawthorne," it rumbled, voice like grinding stone. "Your blood is not yet due." Jack fired. Blue light flared from the muzzle, the bullet leaving a phosphorescent trail as it slammed into the creature's bulk. Baal-Zoth shrieked, more in rage than pain. "Run!" Jack yelled to the boy, who dropped from the demon's suddenly slack grip. Eliza scooped up the child as Jack emptied his gun into the monster. Each shot drove it back a step, but it wasn't enough. "Your ancestors' bargain cannot be undone," Baal-Zoth snarled. "The 7 souls will be claimed." It lunged impossibly fast. Jack braced for impact. A piercing whistle split the air. Light exploded between Jack and the demon, searing bright. Baal-Zoth reeled back, howling. Through spots in his vision, Jack saw a figure approach, Native American, face lined with age and wisdom. "Back to the shadows, beast," the newcomer commanded, shaking some kind of charm. "You have no power here, yet." Baal-Zoth roared in frustration. The air shimmered and it was gone. Silence fell, broken only by ragged breathing and distant sobs. "Who? What?" Jack stammered. The old man turned, dark eyes appraising. "I am Running Wolf, and you, Jack Hawthorne, have much to learn if you hope to save this town." Eliza helped the shaken boy to his feet. "Save it? From that thing?" Running Wolf's expression was grim. "From that? And worse. The seals are weakening. What you saw tonight was only the beginning." Jack holstered his empty gun, mind reeling. "Then teach me, whatever it takes to end this." The shaman nodded. "Come, we have little time. The blood moon rises, and with it, the true horrors of Redemption's past." As they hurried into the night, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just taken his first step down a road from which there was no return. Behind them, the moon hung low and hungry, painting the town in shades of damnation. Chapter 7. The Shaman's Call. Dawn found Jack perched on a sun-bleached boulder at the edge of the Badlands, Running Wolf's weathered face illuminated by the pale light of a dying fire. The old shaman's eyes gleamed with ancient wisdom as he ground herbs in a worn mortar. "The power in your blood," Running Wolf said, his voice like gravel. "It's been dormant, waiting." Jack flexed his scarred palm, remembering the strange energy that had coursed through his gun. "Waiting for what?" "For you to wake it." The shaman sprinkled the herb mixture into a clay cup, adding water from a deerskin pouch. He passed it to Jack, who eyed it warily. "Drink," Running Wolf commanded. "See what your ancestors saw." Jack hesitated, then knocked it back. The liquid burned like fire and ice, setting every nerve alight. He gasped, doubling over as the world twisted and blurred. Visions assaulted him, ley lines pulsing beneath the earth, a web of power converging on Redemption. 7 men in a candlelit room, blood dripping from a knife onto an ancient tome. a monstrous shadow rising, accepting their offer with a terrible laugh. Jack came to, gasping, to find Running Wolf studying him intently. "You saw," the shaman said. It wasn't a question. Jack nodded, his throat dry. "The founding fathers, they tapped into something old. Older than time," Running Wolf agreed. "They sought prosperity, but didn't understand the price." A coyote howled in the distance, the sound morphing into something that raised the hairs on Jack's neck. "How do we stop it?" he asked. Running Wolf's expression darkened. "We don't, not yet. First, you must learn to harness the power in your blood. It's the key to breaking the curse, or dooming us all." The shaman stood, joints creaking. "Come, there's a place of power nearby, a convergence of the ley lines you saw." They hiked in silence, the landscape growing more twisted and alien with each step. Finally, they crested a rise to find a circle of standing stones, each taller than a man. "Here," Running Wolf said, "we begin your true awakening." As they approached the circle, the air grew thick with unseen energy. Jack's skin prickled, his scar burning. "What do I—" he began, but Running Wolf silenced him with a raised hand. "Listen," the shaman instructed. "Not with your ears, with your blood." Jack closed his eyes, focusing inward. At first, there was nothing but the sound of his own heartbeat. Then gradually, he became aware of something else. A rhythm, ancient and powerful, pulsing through the earth beneath his feet. His eyes snapped open. The standing stones glowed with an inner light, pulsing in time with the beat he felt. "I can feel it," Jack breathed. Running Wolf nodded approvingly. "Good. Now reach out, touch the stones." Jack approached the nearest monolith, hand outstretched. As his fingers brushed the rough surface, energy surged through him. He gasped, images flooding his mind. Asterisk redemption through the ages, prospering and withering in 7-year cycles. Asterisk the demon Baelzoth, growing stronger with each sacrifice. Asterisk a prophecy, carved in stone, speaking of a 7th son who could break the cycle. The vision ended abruptly. Jack stumbled back, panting. Running Wolf steadied him. "What did you see?" "Everything," Jack whispered. Then with growing certainty, "I know what I have to do." The shaman's eyes glittered. "Then our real work begins. The blood moon is coming, Jack Hawthorne, and with it, a reckoning generations in the making." As they left the stone circle, Jack felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. Redemption's fate hung in the balance, and his newfound power would tip the scales, one way or another. Chapter 8. Secrets in the Stacks. The floorboards of Doc Holliday's office creaked ominously as Jack, Eliza, and Sheriff Thorne picked their way through the clutter. Dust motes danced in shafts of afternoon light, giving the air a hazy, dreamlike quality. "I still say this is a fool's errand," Thorne grumbled, fingers never straying far from her holster. Jack's eyes scanned the crowded shelves. "If the Alchemist's Codex exists, it's our best shot at understanding what we're up against." Eliza hefted a leather-bound tome. "How do we even know what we're looking for?" "You'll know." Running Wolf's words echoed in Jack's mind. "The book calls to those with the sight." As if on cue, a faint whisper tickled the edge of Jack's consciousness. He turned, drawn to a far corner of the room. There, half hidden behind a stack of medical journals, sat an ancient black-bound book. Its cover seemed to writhe in the dim light, symbols shifting and rearranging themselves. "That's it," Jack breathed, reaching for the tome. The moment his fingers brushed the leather, a jolt of energy surged through him. The room fell away, replaced by a swirling vortex of images and sensations. Archaic rituals performed in hidden caves. The true names of beings older than time. Formulae for bending reality itself. Jack gasped, staggering back. The book fell open, pages flipping of their own accord before settling on a diagram of 7 interlocking circles. "The Founding Pact," Eliza whispered, peering over his shoulder. Thorne's face paled. "I've seen that before, in the mayor's office." Jack's fingers traced the intricate lines. "It's a ritual, a way to bind Baelzoth, but also to draw on its power." "At what cost?" Eliza asked. Before Jack could answer, a low growl rumbled through the room. Shadows deepened in the corners, taking on monstrous shapes. "We need to go," Thorne hissed, drawing her pistol. "Now!" They bolted for the door, Jack clutching the codex to his chest. As they burst into the street, An unearthly shriek split the air. Townsfolk scattered, screaming. Atop the church steeple perched a nightmarish creature, all leathery wings and razor-sharp talons. "Guardians," Jack snarled, recognizing the beast from the codex's pages. "Beelzoth knows we have the book." The creature's eyes locked onto them, burning with hellish intelligence. It launched itself from its perch, diving straight for Jack. Time seemed to slow. Jack felt the power in his blood surge, responding to the imminent threat. Without conscious thought, he thrust out his hand. A shimmering barrier of blue energy erupted between them and the swooping monster. It slammed into the shield with a screech of frustration, momentarily stunned. "Run!" Jack yelled. They sprinted down Main Street, the Guardian's angry cries echoing behind them. More shapes detached from rooftops and alleyways, joining the pursuit. "The church," Thorne gasped. "Consecrated ground. It might slow them down." They veered towards the weathered building, its doors mercifully unlocked. Jack slammed them shut just as talons scraped against wood. Inside, the air hummed with a different kind of energy. The Guardian's shrieks became muffled, distant. "That won't hold them for long," Jack panted, clutching the codex. "We need to decipher this, fast." Eliza nodded grimly. "Where do we start?" Jack's eyes fell on the altar. "With a prayer, and maybe a little blood magic." As he approached the sacred space, the codex grew warm in his hands. Outside, the Guardian's cries took on a note of desperation. The final confrontation was coming, and redemption's fate would be decided by the secrets hidden within those ancient pages. Chapter 9. Visions at Devil's Tower. The truck's engine sputtered and died at the base of Devil's Tower, as if some unseen force forbade further approach. Jack, Eliza, and Running Wolf climbed out, their eyes drawn to the looming monolith against the starry sky. "This is where it all began," Running Wolf intoned, his voice carrying on the night wind. "Where your ancestors first opened the door." Jack's scarred palm throbbed in time with an unseen pulse emanating from the tower. "And where we'll end it." They hiked in silence, the only sound their labored breathing and the crunch of gravel underfoot. As they neared the base, the air grew thick, charged with potential. "Here," Running Wolf said, indicating a hidden cleft in the rock face. Inside, the passage opened into a natural amphitheater. Ancient pictographs covered the walls, depicting figures both human and not. "The ritual site," Eliza breathed, her voice hushed with awe and fear. Jack pulled the alchemist's codex from his pack, its cover writhing more violently than ever. "Let's do this." Running Wolf began preparing a complex array of herbs and crystals in the center of the chamber. "The visions will be intense," he warned. "You may not like what you see." "Doesn't matter," Jack growled. "We need answers." As the shaman chanted in a language older than words, Jack felt the power in his blood respond. The pictographs on the walls began to move, twisting into new configurations. Eliza gasped. "Jack, your eyes!" He caught his reflection in a polished stone. His irises glowed with an otherworldly blue light. Suddenly the world lurched. Jack found himself elsewhere. Elsewhen, 1851. 7 men, faces obscured, stand before an obsidian altar. Blood drips from a ceremonial dagger. "With this offering," one intones, "we secure prosperity for our descendants." A shadow rises, coalescing into Beelzoth's terrifying form. "Fools," it rumbles, "you've doomed them all." The scene shifted. Redemption through the decades. Periods of impossible bounty followed by years of decay and madness. 7 souls claimed each cycle, their screams echoing across time. Jack's father, desperately searching for a way to break the curse. His final confrontation with Mayor Blackwood, ending in blood and betrayal. Another lurch. The future. Redemption consumed by shadows. Beelzoth fully manifested, spreading its corruption across the land. But there, a glimmer of hope. Jack wielding a gun that glowed with arcane sigils, facing down the demon. Jack came to with a gasp, finding himself on his knees. Eliza knelt beside him, concern etched on her face. "What did you see?" Running Wolf asked, his eyes knowing. "Everything," Jack rasped. "The pact, the cycles. What happens if we fail?" He stood, newfound determination stealing his voice. "And how to stop it?" The shaman nodded. "Then you know what must be done." "We need to break the bloodline," Jack said. "All 7 of them. It's the only way to void the contract." Eliza's face paled. "But that means..." Mayor Blackwood, Jack finished grimly, and the others who've profited from this curse for generations. Running Wolf's expression was solemn. It won't be easy. They'll fight to protect what they see as their birthright. Let them, Jack snarled, his eyes flaring blue once more. We end this. Tonight. As they emerged from the tower, the eastern sky began to lighten. Dawn was coming to redemption, but whether it would be a new beginning or the final curtain remained to be seen. Jack checked his gun, the metal humming with awakened power. The final confrontation loomed, and the fate of not just the town but perhaps the world hung in the balance. Chapter 10. The Seventh Sun's Burden. The sun hung low over redemption, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. Jack stood at the edge of town, the weight of destiny heavy on his shoulders. Eliza and Running Wolf flanked him, tension radiating from their rigid postures. You sure about this? Eliza asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack's hand tightened on his gun, blue energy crackling along the barrel. No, he admitted, but we're out of options. Running Wolf's weathered face was grim. The prophecy speaks of the seventh sun. It falls to you, Jack Hawthorne, to either save this town or doom us all. A church bell tolled in the distance. Once, twice, 7 times. The air grew thick, reality itself seeming to warp around them. It's time, Jack said, striding forward. Main Street was deserted, an eerie stillness blanketing the town. As they approached Town Hall, shadows writhed and twisted, taking on monstrous forms. Mayor Blackwood stood on the steps, flanked by 6 other figures, the descendants of the original pact makers. Their eyes glowed with an unholy light. So, Blackwood sneered, the prodigal son returns to fulfill his destiny. Jack raised his gun. This ends now, Blackwood. We're breaking the cycle. The mayor's laugh was cold and mirthless. You have no idea of the forces you're dealing with, boy. The air shimmered, and Beelzoth materialized behind the 7, its massive form dwarfing the humans. Jack felt Eliza stiffen beside him, but he held his ground. I know exactly what I'm dealing with, Jack growled, and I know how to stop it. He fired. The bullet, wreathed in blue flame, struck an invisible barrier before the mayor. Blackwood's smirk faltered. Impossible, he hissed. How did you— The Alchemist's Codex, Jack said, allowing himself a grim smile. Turns out your ancestors left a loophole. Beelzoth's eyes narrowed. The contract cannot be broken, it rumbled. Maybe not, Jack conceded, but it can be renegotiated. He holstered his gun and drew a knife, the blade etched with arcane symbols. Without hesitation, he sliced his palm, letting the blood drip to the ground. I offer myself, Jack intoned, words of power rising unbidden to his lips. The 7th sun in place of the 7 souls. The air crackled with energy. Beelzoth roared, a sound of both rage and hunger. Jack, no, Eliza cried, but Running Wolf held her back. It is his choice, the shaman said solemnly. Mayor Blackwood's face contorted with fury. You fool! You'll doom us all! But it was too late. The ground beneath Jack's feet began to glow, lines of power spreading outward in a complex pattern. The 6 other descendants cried out as similar marks appeared beneath them. What's happening? One of them wailed. Jack's voice was steel. I'm severing your connection to Beelzoth. Your bloodlines will no longer be bound to this curse. Blackwood lunged forward, but an invisible force held him back. You can't do this. The prosperity was built on blood and suffering, Jack cut him off. It ends now. The glow intensified. Jack felt the power in his blood surge, connecting him to the ley lines Running Wolf had shown him. He was the conduit, the fulcrum upon which redemption's fate balanced. Beelzoth's form began to waver, its connection to the physical world weakening. This changes nothing, it snarled. I will return. I always return. Jack met the demon's gaze unflinchingly. And I'll be waiting. With a final ear-splitting shriek, Beelzoth vanished. The 6 descendants collapsed, the unholy light fading from their eyes. Mayor Blackwood alone remained standing, his face a mask of impotent rage. What have you done? Jack stumbled, suddenly exhausted. Eliza rushed to support him. Save the town, he said simply, and damn myself in the process. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, Jack felt the weight of his new role settle upon him. Redemption's guardian, forever bound to this place and the power that ran through it. The curse was broken, but the war had only just begun. Chapter 11. Badlands Pursuit. The full moon hung low over the Badlands, casting long shadows across the twisted landscape. Jack's boots crunched on sun-baked earth as he crested a ridge, Eliza close behind. In the valley below, something moved, something that had no right existing in this world. "There," Jack hissed, pointing at the writhing mass of shadows and teeth. "Beelzoth's leftovers." Eliza's face was grim in the pale light. "Skinwalkers. Running Wolf warned us they'd be drawn to the power vacuum." The creatures suddenly stilled, their misshapen heads swiveling in unison. A chorus of unearthly howls split the night. "They've caught our scent," Jack growled, drawing his gun. Blue energy crackled along the barrel. "Run!" They bolted down the ridge, loose shale skittering beneath their feet. Behind them, the pack gave chase, their unnatural speed closing the gap with terrifying swiftness. Jack spun, firing off 2 shots. The glowing bullets found their marks, eliciting shrieks of pain and fury from the lead pursuers. But more took their place. An endless tide of nightmares made flesh. "We can't outrun them," Eliza panted as they vaulted over a dry creek bed. Jack's mind raced, recalling pages from the Alchemist's Codex. "We don't have to. We just need to reach the ley line nexus." They veered east, towards a towering spire of rock. Jack could feel the thrum of power growing stronger with each step. His blood sang in response, the mark of his pact with Beelzoth burning on his palm. A skinwalker lunged, impossibly fast. Eliza cried out as talons raked her back. Jack whirled, unleashing a blast of raw energy that sent the creature flying. "Almost there," he gasped, half dragging Eliza towards the spire. The air grew thick, reality itself seeming to warp around them. Jack placed his bleeding hand on the sun-warmed stone, channeling every ounce of newfound power into the connection. The world shifted. A shimmering barrier erupted from the ground, encircling them. The skinwalkers slammed into it, howling in frustration and pain. "Now what?" Eliza asked, clutching her wounded shoulder. Jack's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. "Now we send them back where they came from." He began to chant, words of power rising unbidden to his lips. The barrier pulsed, each wave driving the creatures back. The skinwalkers' forms began to unravel, dissolving into mist and shadow. With a final deafening shriek, they vanished. Silence fell over the Badlands. Jack sagged against the spire, suddenly exhausted. Eliza touched his arm, her eyes wide. "How did you do that?" "I'm not entirely sure," Jack admitted. "It's like the land itself is working through me, trying to restore balance." He looked at his hand where the scar from his bargain with Beelzoth now pulsed with a faint blue light. "But every time I use this power, I can feel it changing me. I don't know if I'm becoming something more than human, or less." Eliza's face softened. "You're still you, Jack. Still my brother. We'll figure this out together." As they made their way back towards redemption, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Beelzoth might be gone, but the echoes of its presence lingered. The town, and perhaps the world, would need a guardian to stand against the darkness. Jack Hawthorne, the 7th son, would have to be that guardian, whether he was ready for it or not. Chapter 12. Spirits of Wounded Knee. The moon hung like a pale, watchful eye over Wounded Knee Creek. Jack and Running Wolf stood at the edge of the sacred ground, the weight of history pressing down upon them. In the distance, a spectral whistle pierced the night. "The ghost train approaches," Running Wolf intoned, his voice heavy with ceremony. "Are you prepared for what you might learn, 7th son?" Jack's hand unconsciously moved to his gun, the metal thrumming with barely contained energy. "No," he admitted, "but we're out of options." The shaman nodded, producing a small pouch of herbs. As he began to chant in a language older than time, the air grew thick with unseen potential. A ghostly light appeared on the horizon, growing stronger with each passing moment. The sound of iron wheels on phantom tracks filled the air, accompanied by the wails of long-dead passengers. "Now, Jack," Running Wolf commanded. "Reach out with your blood. Call to them." Jack closed his eyes, focusing on the power that now coursed through his veins. He felt a tug, a connection to something vast and ancient. When he spoke, his voice echoed with otherworldly resonance. "Spirits of Wounded Knee," he called. "We seek your counsel." The ghost train materialized fully, a macabre sight of twisted metal and spectral flames. Translucent figures began to emerge, men, women, and children, their faces etched with the pain of their final moments. One spirit stepped forward, a warrior with eyes that held centuries of sorrow. "Why have you summoned us, keeper of the pact?" Jack swallowed hard. "Beelzoth is gone, but its influence lingers. We need to know how to cleanse the land completely." The warrior's gaze seemed to pierce Jack's very soul. "The demon's taint runs deep. It cannot be purged without great sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" Jack asked, dread pooling in his stomach. The spirit gestured to Jack's scarred palm. "The power you now wield comes at a cost. Each time you use it, you bind yourself more tightly to this place. To truly cleanse the land, you may have to give up your humanity entirely." Running Wolf inhaled sharply. Jack's mind reeled at the implications. "There has to be another way," he protested. The warrior's expression softened slightly. "Perhaps. The future is not set in stone. But know this, seventh son. The path ahead is fraught with danger. You will be tested in ways you cannot imagine." Other spirits began to speak, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of warnings and cryptic advice. Jack struggled to make sense of it all, his head pounding with the effort of maintaining the connection. Suddenly, a child's spirit broke from the group, approaching Jack with ethereal tears in her eyes. "The shadows are hungry," she whispered. "They remember the taste of redemption's souls. They will return." Before Jack could respond, the ghost train's whistle blew once more. The spirits began to fade, drawn back to their eternal journey. "Wait!" Jack called. "I need to know more!" But it was too late. The train vanished into the mist, leaving only echoes of its passage. Jack turned to Running Wolf, his face etched with determination and fear. "What do we do now?" The shaman's eyes were grave. "We prepare, seventh son. For the battle ahead will determine not just redemption's fate, but perhaps the fate of the world itself." As they made their way back towards town, Jack felt the weight of his destiny pressing down upon him. The power in his blood sang with potential and danger. He was changing, becoming something more or less than human. And in the shadows that clung to redemption's edges, hungry eyes watched and waited for their chance to strike. Chapter 13, The Order Revealed. The streets of Deadwood bustled with a different kind of energy than redemption, less supernatural dread, more frontier chaos. Jack and Eliza wove through the crowd, following the cryptic directions Running Wolf had given them. "You sure about this?" Eliza muttered, eyeing a group of rough-looking men outside a saloon. Jack's hand never strayed far from his gun. "No, but if there's any chance of finding out more about Pa's past, this is it." They turned down a narrow alley, coming face to face with a nondescript wooden door. A tarnished plaque read, "Scarlet Spur Imports." Jack knocked, a complex pattern Running Wolf had taught him. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the sound of multiple locks disengaging. The door creaked open, revealing a grizzled man with a revolver trained on them. "State your business." Jack held up his scarred palm, pulsing with faint blue light. "I'm Jack Hawthorne. I believe you knew my father." The man's eyes widened. He ushered them inside quickly, bolting the door behind them. The interior was a stark contrast to the dingy exterior gleaming wood, walls lined with arcane symbols, and a massive table covered in maps and ancient tomes. "I'll be damned," the man breathed. "You're really his boy." He holstered his gun. "Name's Garrett. I rode with your pa back in the day." Jack's heart raced. "Then you know about the Order of the Scarlet Spur?" Garrett finished. "Yeah, I know. We're all that stands between this world and the things that go bump in the night." Eliza's eyes narrowed. "If you're so important, where were you when redemption needed help?" Garrett's face darkened. "We tried. Your pa, he went rogue. Thought he could handle Beelzoth on his own. By the time we realized how bad things had gotten, it was too late." He moved to a locked cabinet, retrieving a worn journal. This was his. Might help you understand what you're up against. Jack took the book reverently, feeling the weight of his father's legacy. As he flipped through the pages, his blood ran cold. "This is impossible," he whispered. Eliza peered over his shoulder. "What is it?" "According to this, Beelzoth wasn't just some random demon. It was a scout, the vanguard of something much, much worse." Garrett nodded grimly. "Your pa figured it out too late. There's an invasion coming, Jack. And redemption? It's ground zero." The air in the room seemed to grow thick. Jack's scar throbbed in time with his racing pulse. "How do we stop it?" he demanded. Garrett's laugh was hollow. That's the million-dollar question, ain't it? Your pa thought he'd found a way, but... He trailed off, pain etched on his face. Jack's eyes hardened. Then we finish what he started. Eliza touched his arm. Jack, this is bigger than us. Maybe we should... What? He cut her off. Run? Hide? That thing in redemption was just the beginning, Eliza. We can't walk away from this. Garrett studied Jack intently. You've got your father's fire, that's for damn sure. But are you ready for what this life entails? The Order doesn't make for long lifespans or happy endings. Jack met his gaze unflinchingly. I made a pact to protect redemption. Sounds like that pact just got a whole lot bigger. The older man nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. He moved to a weapons rack, retrieving an ornate revolver. This was your father's, forged with blood magic and cold iron. It's yours now. As Jack's fingers closed around the grip, he felt a surge of power, familiar yet different from his own abilities. This was a legacy, passed down through generations of monster hunters. Welcome to the Order of the Scarlet Spur, Jack Hawthorne, Garrett said solemnly. May God have mercy on your soul, 'cause the things we fight sure as hell won't. Outside, thunder rumbled ominously. The coming storm felt like more than just weather. It was the first whispers of a war that would determine the fate of not just redemption, but the entire world. And Jack Hawthorne, the seventh son, now stood at the center of it all. Chapter 14. Betrayal at Sunset. The sun hung low over redemption, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. Jack and Eliza stood before Town Hall, tension crackling in the air like static before a storm. Mayor Blackwood emerged, his usual smug demeanor replaced by barely concealed panic. Hawthorne, he spat. Come to gloat over the mess you've made? Jack's hand rested on his father's gun, power thrumming through the metal. No games, Blackwood. We know about the invasion. Where's the portal? The mayor's face twisted. You fool! You have no idea what forces you're meddling with. Then enlighten us, Eliza snarled. Blackwood's eyes darted around as if searching for unseen watchers. Not here, he hissed. Meet me at the old silver mine at midnight. I'll tell you everything. As the mayor retreated into Town Hall, Jack felt a chill run down his spine. I don't like this, he muttered. Eliza nodded grimly. Smells like a trap. Probably is, but we're out of options. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. As midnight approached, Jack and Eliza made their way to the abandoned mine, every shadow seeming to writhe with malevolent intent. The entrance yawned before them, a maw of absolute darkness. Jack's scar pulsed, reacting to some unseen energy. Mayor? He called, voice echoing in the stillness. Silence. Then a scream, high and terrified. Eliza's scream. Jack whirled to find his sister gone, drag marks in the dirt leading into the mine. Eliza! He roared, plunging into the darkness. The tunnel twisted and turned, the air growing thick with the stench of sulfur and decay. Jack's blood sang with power, casting a faint blue glow that barely penetrated the gloom. He burst into a large chamber, skidding to a halt at the sight before him. Mayor Blackwood stood at the center of an intricate ritual circle, dark energy crackling around him. Eliza lay unconscious at his feet. I'm sorry it came to this, Jack, Blackwood said, his voice distorted and inhuman. But the old ways must be preserved. Jack's gun was in his hand in an instant, blue fire wreathing the barrel. Let her go, you bastard! Blackwood laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally. Oh, I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, your sister's blood is the key to reopening the portal. Baal Zoth may be gone, but its masters are still very much interested in our little town. You're insane, Jack snarled. You've seen what these things can do. Why would you help them? Power, my boy! Blackwood's eyes glowed with fevered intensity. The power to reshape reality itself. All it costs is one little town. Jack's finger tightened on the trigger. Not gonna happen. He fired, the bullet streaking towards Blackwood's heart. At the last instant, an invisible barrier flared to life, deflecting the shot. You disappoint me, Jack, Blackwood sneered. I'd hoped you'd see reason. No matter. The ritual is nearly complete. The mayor began to chant in a language that hurt Jack's ears to hear. The circle pulsed with malevolent light, tendrils of energy wrapping around Eliza's prone form. Desperation clawed at Jack's insides. He reached deep within himself, tapping into the well of power that had been growing since his pact with Baal Zoth. Blue fire erupted from his hands, slamming into Blackwood's barrier. The mayor's chant faltered as he staggered under the assault. "You can't stop this, Jack," Blackwood roared. "The invasion is coming, whether you like it or not." Jack poured everything he had into the attack, feeling his humanity slipping away with each passing second. The barrier began to crack. With a final, primal yell, Jack shattered Blackwood's defenses. The mayor flew backward, slamming into the cavern wall. Jack rushed to Eliza's side, gathering her in his arms. She stirred weakly. "Jack, I've got you," he murmured. "It's over." But as he turned to leave, a low, rumbling laugh filled the chamber. Blackwood rose, his form twisting and growing into something monstrous. "Oh no, Jack Hawthorne!" The thing that was no longer human growled. "It's only just begun." As Jack faced down the abomination that Blackwood had become, he realized with grim certainty that this was merely the opening salvo in a war that would determine the fate of not just redemption, but the entire world. And he, the seventh son, stood as the last line of defense against the coming darkness. Chapter 15, Hellmouth Horrors. The earth trembled beneath Jack's feet as he raced through Yellowstone's otherworldly landscape, steam vents hissing like the breath of some colossal beast. Behind him, Eliza and Garrett struggled to keep pace, their faces etched with grim determination. "There!" Garrett shouted, pointing to a violently bubbling pool that pulsed with an unnatural, sickly light. Jack skidded to a halt at the edge, his blood singing in response to the raw power emanating from the roiling waters. This was it, the Hellmouth, the weakened barrier between their world and the nightmare realm beyond. "We're too late," Eliza gasped, her eyes wide with horror. A human form was rising from the pool, skin blistering and reforming as it clawed its way onto solid ground. Jack recognized the terrified face, Sarah, the baker's daughter who'd gone missing 3 days ago. "Hold on!" Jack yelled, reaching for her outstretched hand. As their fingers touched, Jack felt a jolt of otherworldly energy course through him. Visions flashed before his eyes, glimpses of a realm of eternal torment, of monstrosities beyond human comprehension. With a Herculean effort, he pulled Sarah from the pool. She collapsed, sobbing into Eliza's arms. "Jack, look out!" Garrett's warning came a split second too late. A tentacle, glistening and impossibly long, erupted from the Hellmouth. It wrapped around Jack's ankle, yanking him off his feet. Time slowed. Jack saw Eliza's face contorted in a silent scream. He saw Garrett, diving forward with outstretched hands, and he saw the roiling surface of the pool, rushing up to meet him. The world dissolved into chaos and pain. Jack found himself submerged in liquid fire, every nerve ending screaming in agony. Through the murk, he glimpsed vast shapes moving with terrible purpose, the invasion force, preparing to breach the weakened veil between worlds. His lungs burned for air, but he knew that to breathe would be to invite possession by the entities that swarmed around him. With the last of his strength, Jack reached for the power within his blood. Blue fire erupted from his body, creating a protective cocoon. The creatures recoiled, shrieking in fury and pain. Using the repulsive force of his energy, Jack propelled himself upward, bursting through the surface of the pool with a gasp. Garrett and Eliza were there in an instant, dragging him to safety. "Did you see?" Jack coughed, his voice raw. "They're coming. An army of them." Garrett's face was ashen. "How long do we have?" Before Jack could answer, a bone-chilling howl split the air. The Hellmouth churned violently, disgorging a nightmarish creature, all tentacles and gnashing teeth. "Not long," Jack growled, drawing his father's gun. The battle that followed was a blur of gunfire, eldritch energy, and desperate maneuvers. Jack pushed his newfound powers to their limit, feeling his humanity slip further away with each blast of blue fire. In the end, they managed to drive the monstrosity back into the pool, but as it sank beneath the roiling surface, its baleful eye fixed on Jack. A voice, ancient and terrible, echoed in his mind. "You've won nothing, seventh son. We are Legion, and we are coming. Your world will burn." As the Hellmouth's energy subsided, Jack slumped to the ground, utterly spent. Sarah was safe, but at what cost? He'd glimpsed the true scale of the threat they faced, and for the first time since this all began, he felt the cold grip of despair. Eliza knelt beside him, concern etched on her face. "Jack, what do we do now?" He met her gaze, his eyes glowing with residual power. We prepare. We gather every ally we can. Because when that army comes through, he trailed off, the weight of their task settling heavily on his shoulders. Garrett finished the thought, his voice grim. It'll be the end of everything. As they made their way back to Redemption, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they'd won the battle, but were rapidly losing the war. The power within him grew stronger, but at what cost to his soul? The true test was yet to come, and the fate of the world hung in the balance. Chapter 16. Paint Mines Prophecy. The sun hung low over the paint mines, casting long shadows across the otherworldly landscape of colorful clay formations. Jack and Sarah Blackwood picked their way carefully through the twisting canyons, every step raising puffs of ochre dust. "You sure about this?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with tension. Jack's scarred palm throbbed in response to the latent energy permeating the area. "No," he admitted, but Running Wolf was clear. "The answers we need are here." They rounded a bend and froze. Before them stood a massive clay wall, covered in ancient pictographs that seemed to writhe and shift in the fading light. "There," Sarah breathed, pointing to a central image. "That looks like Beelzoth," Jack finished grimly. The demon's form was unmistakable, even rendered in primitive paint. As they approached, Jack felt a familiar surge of power in his blood. Without conscious thought, he reached out and pressed his hand against the cool clay. The world exploded into chaos. Visions assaulted Jack's mind, a kaleidoscope of past and future. The original 7 settlers, their faces twisted with greed and fear, completing the ritual that would doom redemption. Waves of darkness sweeping across the land, devouring everything in their path. A figure wreathed in blue fire, standing alone against an army of nightmares. Jack gasped, staggering back. Sarah caught him, her own eyes wide with shock. "What did you see?" she demanded. Before Jack could answer, the pictographs began to glow with an inner light. Streams of colored energy flowed from the images, coalescing into a shimmering vortex. A voice, ancient and resonant, filled the air. "Seventh son, heed our warning. The barrier weakens. The hungry dark gathers its strength. Only by embracing your true nature can you hope to stem the tide." Jack's blood ran cold. "My true nature? What does that mean?" The vortex pulsed, and new images formed. Jack, his eyes blazing with otherworldly power, commanding forces beyond human comprehension. Redemption, transformed into a bastion against the encroaching darkness. A price, terrible and absolute, paid in blood and sacrifice. "The choice is yours," the voice intoned. "Embrace your destiny and save your world, or cling to your humanity and watch it burn." The visions faded, leaving Jack and Sarah alone in the gathering twilight. Sarah's face was pale. "Jack, what are you going to do?" He stared at his hand, where tendrils of blue energy still danced across his skin. The power sang to him, promising strength beyond imagining. But at what cost? "I don't know," he said softly. "But whatever's coming, we need to be ready." As they made their way back to Redemption, Jack felt the weight of prophecy settling on his shoulders. The paint mines had shown him a possible future, but the path to get there remained shrouded in uncertainty. One thing was clear: the final battle for the soul of redemption, and perhaps the world, was fast approaching. And Jack Hawthorne, the reluctant 7th son, would stand at its center. The sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the land into darkness. In the shadows, hungry eyes watched and waited for their chance to strike. Chapter 17. The Wolfpack's Vigil. Custer State Park stretched out before them, a sea of grass painted silver by the full moon. Jack stood at the edge of a clearing, Eliza and Running Wolf flanking him. The night air thrummed with tension and unseen energy. "You're sure about this?" Eliza whispered, her hand never straying far from her gun. Jack's eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light. "No, but we're out of options." Running Wolf began to chant, his guttural words carrying on the wind. As if in response, a lone howl split the night, long, mournful, and tinged with something not quite natural. "They come," the shaman intoned. Shapes melted out of the darkness. Wolves, but larger than any Jack had ever seen. Their eyes glowed with an eerie intelligence, pelts shimmering with hints of spectral energy. The pack parted, and an enormous alpha padded forward. Its fur was silver, lined with scars from countless battles. When it spoke, Jack felt the words in his mind rather than hearing them aloud. "Seventh son," the Alpha growled. "You dare summon the guardians of the Black Hills?" Jack stepped forward, forcing himself to meet the creature's gaze. "We need your help. Something's coming. Something that threatens not just redemption, but everything." The Alpha's eyes narrowed. "We know of the stirring darkness. Why should we involve ourselves in the affairs of men?" "Because if we fall," Jack said, his voice carrying the weight of prophecy, "you'll be next." A ripple of unease passed through the pack. The Alpha considered Jack for a long moment, then inclined its massive head. "Show us," it commanded. Jack hesitated, then reached out to touch the wolf's forehead. The moment their skin connected, visions flowed between them. The horrors Jack had witnessed, the apocalyptic future he'd glimpsed in the paint mines. The Alpha recoiled, a low growl rumbling in its chest. "The taint spreads further than we realized." "Will you help us?" Eliza asked, her voice tight with tension. The pack leader was silent for a long moment. Then it threw back its head and howled, a sound that carried power and ancient magic. "The Custer wolfpack stands with you, seventh son," the Alpha declared. "But know this, the path ahead is fraught with danger. The power you wield comes at a great cost." Jack nodded grimly. "I'm starting to understand that." As if to underscore the point, blue energy crackled along his arms, responding to the primal force of the wolfpack. He could feel the human part of himself slipping further away with each passing moment. The Alpha's eyes softened, showing a hint of sympathy. "You stand at a crossroads, Jack Hawthorne. The choices you make in the coming days will determine not just your fate, but the fate of all." "No pressure," Eliza muttered. The pack began to disperse, melting back into the shadows of the park. The Alpha remained, its gaze fixed on Jack. "When the time comes," it said, "howl, we will answer." With that, the great wolf turned and loped away, leaving Jack, Eliza, and Running Wolf alone in the moonlit clearing. "Well," Eliza said, breaking the silence, "I guess we've got ourselves some furry allies." Jack didn't respond. His mind was racing, grappling with the weight of his destiny and the terrible choices that lay ahead. Running Wolf placed a gnarled hand on Jack's shoulder. "The Wolfpack's power is ancient and true," he said. "But remember, seventh son, the greatest strength lies within yourself." As they made their way back toward redemption, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into the calm before an unprecedented storm. The power in his blood sang with potential and danger. The final confrontation loomed, and Jack Hawthorne, caught between humanity and something far beyond it, would stand at its center, for better or for worse. Chapter 18. Redemption's Reckoning. The sky over Redemption boiled with unnatural storm clouds, flashes of eldritch lightning illuminating the town's deserted streets. Jack stood at the center of Main Street, his father's gun in one hand, the other crackling with barely contained energy. Eliza, Garrett, and Running Wolf flanked him, their faces grim with determination. The air hummed with tension, reality itself seeming to warp and twist. "It's time," Jack said, his voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. As if in response, a bone-chilling howl echoed from the direction of Custer State Park. The Custer Wolfpack had honored their promise. Garrett checked his weapons one last time. "You sure about this, Hawthorne?" Jack's eyes glowed with an inner fire. "No, but we're out of options." The ground began to tremble. Cracks appeared in the earth, oozing a sickly phosphorescent light. From the shadows, grotesque shapes began to emerge, the vanguard of Beelzoth's masters. "Here they come," Eliza breathed, raising her rifle. The battle erupted with furious intensity. Gunfire and magical energy lit up the night as Redemption's defenders clashed with the otherworldly horrors. Jack was a whirlwind of destruction, each shot from his father's gun leaving trails of blue fire. Through the chaos, a familiar figure appeared, Mayor Blackwood, his form twisted and monstrous. "It's too late, Hawthorne," he roared. "The seal is breaking. They're coming through." Jack turned to face his nemesis, power surging through his veins. "Not if I have anything to say about it." He reached deep within himself, tapping into the well of energy that had been growing since his pact with Beelzoth. Blue fire erupted from his hands, slamming into Blackwood with devastating force. The corrupted mayor howled in agony, his flesh bubbling and melting. But even as he fell, more horrors poured from the widening cracks in reality. Eliza's voice cut through the din. "Jack, the town hall!" He turned to see a massive portal forming above the building, a yawning void that threatened to swallow redemption whole. Jack knew what he had to do. "Cover me!" he shouted, sprinting toward the vortex. As he ran, memories flashed through his mind. His father's journal, Running Wolf's warnings, the paint mine's prophecy. Everything had led to this moment. Reaching the base of the town hall, Jack began to climb. Tentacles and claws swiped at him, but he pressed on, driven by a power greater than himself. At the roof's edge, he paused, staring into the swirling abyss. The voices of Beelzoth's masters whispered promises of power, of godhood. For a moment, Jack wavered. Then Eliza's voice cut through the madness. "Jack, remember who you are." With a primal roar, Jack plunged his hands into the vortex. Blue fire erupted from his body, meeting the encroaching darkness in a cataclysmic explosion of energy. Pain unlike anything he'd ever experienced tore through him. Jack felt his humanity slipping away, replaced by something vast and terrible. But he held on, pouring every ounce of his being into sealing the breach. The world went white. When Jack came to, he found himself lying in the rubble-strewn street. Eliza knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. Did we win?" he croaked. Eliza nodded, her voice choked with emotion. "You did it, Jack. You saved us all." But as he tried to sit up, Jack realized something was terribly wrong. His body felt different, alien. "Eliza," he whispered, fear gripping his heart. "What's happened to me?" His sister's expression was a mixture of awe and sorrow. "You've changed, Jack. The power, it's transformed you." As the dust settled over redemption, Jack Hawthorne faced an uncertain future. He had saved the town, perhaps the world, but at what cost to his own humanity? The war was won, but for the seventh son, a new chapter was just beginning. Chapter 19, Showdown at Mount Rushmore. The pre-dawn air crackled with tension as Jack stood before the looming faces of Mount Rushmore. Behind him, Eliza, Garrett, and a contingent of the Order of the Scarlet Spur formed a grim line of defense. Above, storm clouds roiled unnaturally, flashes of otherworldly lightning illuminating the scene. Jack's transformed body hummed with power, blue energy crackling across his skin. He could feel the barrier between worlds stretching thin, ready to tear at any moment. "They're coming," he growled, his voice carrying an inhuman resonance. As if in response, the earth began to tremble. Cracks spread across the mountain's face, oozing a sickly, phosphorescent light. The air split with an ear-shattering roar as a massive portal tore open between the stone presidents. Beelzoth emerged first, its form more terrifying than ever. Behind it came an army of nightmares, pouring forth from the breach in reality. "Now!" Jack bellowed. Gunfire erupted from the human defenders, each bullet imbued with arcane energy. Jack raised his hands, unleashing a torrent of blue fire that met the encroaching horde head-on. The battle raged with furious intensity. Jack was everywhere at once, his newfound powers allowing him to move with impossible speed. But for every monster he felled, two more took its place. Through the chaos, a familiar voice rang out. "Jack Hawthorne!" He turned to see Mayor Blackwood, or what was left of him. The corrupted official had become a grotesque amalgamation of man and demon, power radiating from his twisted form. "This ends now!" Jack snarled, launching himself at his nemesis. Their clash was cataclysmic. Blue fire met corrupted darkness, the very fabric of reality warping around them. Jack could feel his humanity slipping further away with each pulse of power, but he pushed on, driven by the need to end this once and for all. "You're too late," Blackwood cackled, his voice a hellish chorus. "The masters are coming. This world will burn." Jack's response was a primal roar as he poured every ounce of his being into a final devastating attack. The resulting explosion sent both combatants hurtling apart. As Jack struggled to his feet, he saw the portal expanding. The veil between worlds stretched to its breaking point. In the void beyond, vast shapes moved with terrible purpose. He knew what he had to do. "Eliza!" he called out. "The Codex!" His sister tossed him the ancient tome. Jack caught it, feeling the weight of destiny in his hands. He began to chant, words of power rising unbidden to his lips. The world seemed to hold its breath. With a final earth-shattering cry, Jack unleashed the full extent of his power. Blue fire erupted from his body, meeting the encroaching darkness in a cataclysmic explosion of energy. Pain, unlike anything he'd ever known, tore through him. Jack felt himself unraveling, his very essence being used to seal the breach. But he held on, pouring every fragment of his transformed being into the task. The portal began to shrink, reality knitting itself back together. Baal-Zoth and its army howled in fury as they were dragged back into the void. In the final moment before the breach closed, Jack locked eyes with Blackwood. The corrupted mayor's face twisted in a mix of hatred and fear as he too was pulled into the abyss. With a thunderous crack, the portal snapped shut. Silence fell over Mount Rushmore, broken only by the ragged breathing of the survivors. Where Jack had stood, there was now only a scorch mark on the ground, wisps of blue energy fading into the air. Eliza rushed forward, tears streaming down her face. "Jack! Jack!" For a long, terrible moment, there was nothing. Then slowly the air began to shimmer. Jack's form coalesced, but he was changed. His body seemed to be composed of pure energy, only vaguely humanoid in shape. "Eliza," he said, his voice echoing strangely. "It's done." As the sun rose over the scarred landscape, the defenders of humanity grappled with their Pyrrhic victory. The world was saved, but at what cost? Jack Hawthorne, the seventh son, had become something beyond human, a guardian poised between worlds, forever changed by the power he had embraced to save everything he loved. Chapter 20. The Price of Victory. The sun rose over redemption, its warm light a stark contrast to the devastation that lay scattered across the town. Jack stood atop the ruined clock tower, his ethereal form shimmering in the morning air. Below, the townsfolk emerged from their shelters, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear as they beheld their changed protector. Eliza approached, her footsteps hesitant on the debris-strewn street. "Jack!" she called, voice quavering. "Are you still you?" He turned, his featureless face somehow conveying a profound sadness. "I'm here, Eliza, but I'm not the same. I can never be the same." As he floated down to street level, the gathered crowd instinctively stepped back. Jack could feel their emotions washing over him, gratitude, terror, uncertainty. He was connected to redemption now in ways he could barely comprehend. Garrett pushed through the throng, his grizzled face etched with concern. "The breach is sealed," he reported. "But at what cost, Hawthorne?" Jack's form flickered, tendrils of blue energy coiling around him. "Everything," he said simply. Running Wolf approached, his ancient eyes studying Jack intently. "The prophecy is fulfilled," the shaman intoned. "The seventh son has become the town's eternal guardian. But the burden you bear is mine alone," Jack finished. He turned, addressing the gathered townsfolk. "Redemption is safe, the darkness is pushed back, but it will never truly be gone." A murmur ran through the crowd. Jack could sense their unasked questions, their fears about what his transformation meant for the future. "I'm not human anymore," he continued, his voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. "But I'm still here to protect you, all of you. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Eliza stepped forward, tears glistening in her eyes. She reached out, her hand passing through Jack's ethereal form with a crackle of energy. "You sacrificed everything for us," she whispered. "Not everything," Jack replied softly. "I still have my purpose, my home." As the day wore on, the reality of their victory and its cost began to sink in. The Order of the Scarlet Spur set about securing the town's borders, warding against any lingering supernatural threats. Townsfolk worked to rebuild, their efforts now tinged with a new understanding of the world's hidden dangers. And Jack drifted between realms, one foot in the world of the living, the other in places beyond human comprehension. He could feel the ley lines pulsing beneath redemption, could sense the echoes of Baal-Zoth's influence still lingering in the shadows. As night fell, he found himself back atop the clock tower. The stars seemed different now, their light carrying messages he was only beginning to decipher. Was it worth it? Eliza's voice came from behind him. She had climbed up to join him, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. Jack was silent for a long moment. "Ask me again in 100 years, he finally said. "Or 1,000. I'll still be here, watching over redemption. It's who I am now. What I am." Eliza nodded, understanding and sorrow mingling in her eyes. "You're a hero, Jack. Never forget that." As his sister descended the tower, Jack turned his gaze back to the horizon. He could feel them out there. Other threats, other darkness, waiting to test redemption's defenses. But he would be ready. The seventh son had become something more, something eternal. And redemption, for better or worse, would never be the same. Epilogue. Dawn's new guardian. The years rolled by like tumbleweeds across Redemption's haunted plains. Decades blurred into centuries, the town evolving while its ethereal protector remained a constant, watchful presence. Jack Hawthorne, once the seventh son, now a being beyond mortal comprehension, drifted through the streets he'd sworn to defend. His form shimmered with barely contained power, a living reminder of the price paid for the town's survival. Redemption had changed. Modern buildings stood alongside restored remnants of its frontier past. The Order of the Scarlet Spur had established a permanent headquarters, training new generations to face the darkness that lurked at the edges of reality. Yet some things remained eerily familiar. The old saloon still stood, now a museum dedicated to the town's supernatural history. Inside, a faded photograph showed a young man with haunted eyes. Jack, before his transformation. Beside it, an artist's rendering depicted the guardian he'd become. As dawn broke over the distant Badlands, Jack felt a familiar stirring in the ley lines. Something was coming. Something old. Something hungry. He rose into the air, blue energy crackling around him. From across town, howls erupted as the descendants of the Custer wolfpack answered an unspoken call. Below, a group of order initiates emerged from their dormitory, led by a woman whose features echoed those of Eliza Hawthorne. They looked up at their protector with a mixture of awe and determination. Jack's voice, carrying the weight of countless years, resonated through the town. Redemption stands ready, as it always has, as it always will. The sun crested the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and promise. Jack Hawthorne, the eternal guardian, faced the coming storm. The legacy of the seventh son lived on, a beacon of hope against the encroaching dark. And Redemption, the town that had seen the worst of both worlds, prepared once more to stand its ground. The story of the seventh son had ended, but for Jack Hawthorne and for Redemption, the vigil was eternal. The next chapter in their unending tale was about to begin.